evening. Welcome to IntellectualRadio.com. You are joining me, Lynn Sharif, the Wise Wife Radio Show. So I really appreciate you being here. We're going to jump right in. Today, I'm going to talk about, and it's part of the whole ongoing thing of controlling one's tongue. Controlling one's tongue is so very important because the words that you say, and this is for men and women. I'm primarily talking to wives. This is a Wise Wife Radio show, but of course there are many men that listen to the show as well. But that one small thing in your mouth has the power to burn down your marriage. So I really am focusing on your tongue. And today I want to talk about nagging. And I had someone say once I posted it, someone said, well, because the graphics showed a woman setting her husband or her spouse or her significant other on fire. But yes, you're right. It is not just women who nag. Men, they can nag too. So we're going to talk about just nagging, and I'm going to just speak spouse. I'm not saying women, this is just for you, because it's not. So ask yourself if you nag. And your answer might be, no, I don't. But I would like for you to ask your spouse, do I nag? And please know that I'm not putting you out here in this boat by yourself, because I had the exact same conversation with my husband, and I will certainly reveal what that conversation looked like, whether or not I did it, I do it, and also how we might avoid either of us doing it. So I want you to ask your spouse if you're guilty of nagging. So let's start with the definition of nagging. And the definition of nagging is really about pestering your spouse with your demands or with your pleas or your requests for them to do what you want. It's when they're not doing what you would like for them to do. It is the constant is the issue, the constant request, because a simple one-time request is not nagging, because in order for it to cross over into nagging, it needs to have a negative effect on the other person. It usually, because nagging is really about annoying through your constant scolding, complaining, or urging. That's the dictionary definition of nagging. And really, nagging is something that is motivated by one side of the relationship, that one spouse, to change some aspect of the other's actions. And it's not even complaining, because you can have a complaint, and a complaint can be a one-time complaint, or you could just be venting and talking about how something lands on you, your emotions around a particular subject. But that is not nagging. In order for it to be nagging, it has to be constant, more than just one time. And so let's look at some of the top reasons for nagging. There are many, but the top one, and I'm not going to say that they're in any order of importance, because if it's you and your marriage, it's important to you. So the top reasons are getting household tasks completed. So household task completion, that would be me. Money. It could be about spending money, or it could be about one's personal habits. Like, I really cannot stand it when you take your shoes off and you leave them at the bottom of the stairs. It could be about your spouse's appearance. I really would like for you to, you could be nagging them about coloring or cutting their hair or something like that. Another one that comes up is around someone's health. You may be wanting your spouse to work out more or eat better, and you're always after them. Every time they take a bite of something you don't like or it is not good for them, you nag them about it. So the health, or even the kids, about what you do or don't do with the children. That also is on the list of things that may come up and cause you to nag. the amount of love, like you don't hold my hand enough. You're not affectionate enough. You don't put your arm around me when we go out. Every time we go out, that's something that could become a source of nagging. It could be around the balance of work in the house. The balance of work in the house, how much time you spend at work. I certainly have heard about complaints from one spouse to another that you work too much or something like that. And as a result of you working too much, we don't spend enough time together. So those are all things that can rise to the level of nagging. So let's talk about the process for nagging. How does it come about? And so the request comes from one side of the couple. So there is something that the spouse requests or says, but then the other person, they're not motivated to do it. They're not motivated to do it. So they refuse either outright, or one of the reasons that it becomes a nag is because they refuse the request in their head. So they are not motivated to do it, or maybe they didn't hear it. Maybe they weren't paying full attention to you when you talk, or when you were talking about it and it came up and they just didn't hear it. But the point is, maybe when that person heard the request, they in their minds didn't agree that whatever it is that you need or want needed to be done. So the person who is receiving the request, because it's a request at this point, they are either going to do it or they're going to refuse. And I call that the silent refusal. Ain't nowhere in the world. In their heads, they're like, ain't nowhere in the world I'm doing that. I'm just not doing it. And so when it becomes a never-ending circle, because that happens, but then they don't receive a response, and then it becomes a never-ending circle. And then I'll tell you about what happens at that point. And if you're just joining us, you are at IntellectualRadio.com. I'm Lynn Sharif. So glad that you're joining me for the Wise Wife Radio Show. And we are today talking about one aspect of controlling our mouths. And this is not just for women, but we're talking today about nagging. And we're talking about how to recognize, because I believe that a person may have a belief in their head about whether or not they nag, but I want you to ask your significant other, ask your spouse, do I nag? Be ready for the response. So say that nagging has happened a few times, and I gave a list of those subjects that the nagging could be about. And so maybe the nag happened for a few times, but then in the receiver's head, they're like, you know what? Let me do this to just shut them up. I'm just going to do it just to shut their mouth. Well, here's what happens. If you do it in that way, the person who's doing the nagging believes that nagging worked. They believe that the fact that they kept on, it finally worked. So guess what? The only way for me to get what I want is to nag my spouse about it. But see, yeah, things may get done, but what I call the crash and burn of nagging is that the person who is getting nagged at could be getting annoyed about the repeated requests and the constant repeated requests. It could be several of them, but the method of repeated requests, the method of nagging, the other side, the flip side is that nagging can create anger. It can create anger and really make your spouse less likely to really comply with your future requests. It could backfire. So if it backfires, and this may be a dynamic that it could be happening in your relationship or someone else's relationship that you know, there could be animosity that's built up because that reacting, in the person who is getting nagged in their mind, they're like, okay, they may believe then that their spouse is the problem because you always nag. That becomes a problem. And so that's the backfire. That is the dynamic that could become dangerous if nagging is the way of getting things done. Because with that, okay, now it's your fault because you're always nagging and you never do anything that I ask you to do. each of you can become more angry and less motivated to back down. And then it becomes a stalemate. And I have absolutely talked to couples who are at a stalemate. It becomes a circular argument, but the real bottom line to it is that it's nagging. And I did ask, because as I said, you can certainly believe that you don't nag, but I asked my own husband if I nag. And ours tends to be around getting things done around the house. And there are some things that he said I do and have nagged about. And for me, I felt that I didn't know what was going on in his head. And so I would ask again. And so he did give me a way of, okay, how can we do this? If I know that you need something done, then ask me in this particular way and then follow up. But we're going to get to that. We're definitely going to get to that because I want to get more to solutions. And so I'm moving into that. And so one of the potential solutions for this would be for you, the person who is being nagged, to respond to the requests the first time around. Crazy concept. Maybe you could respond to the request in a positive way. Or if it's in your mind something that you don't feel that it's necessary, guess what? Communication. Can you give an update on where this request is? Or it may even open up the conversation if it's something that you don't agree with or something like that. Like, okay, you're nagging me because I work too much. Well, can we come up with a day that maybe I take off and come home a little early or something like that? It's communicating about it, but actually giving an update on where this request is rather than not saying anything at all. Because that is what we found, at least my husband and I didn't know where he was on it. Is it something, I mean, do you see that it's not done? Or, and if you see it, can you at least acknowledge to me what the issue is? Why aren't we moving forward? So that's one way. And so that is really going to require, for those who feel that they are being nagged, you really have to examine your attitude about what is preventing you from responding or giving updates about what's going on. And I also want you to, avoid what I call malicious non-compliance. Like, because you've dug your heels in, it's non-compliant, but I call it malicious because in your mind, you're like, I'm not doing it. And I'm not doing it just because of the principle. I don't want you to do that. Because that, of course, that is moving into where contempt would start to, that resistance, that contempt, those are all negative feelings that really can ultimately backfire and hurt the relationship. Or even saying that you will do something and then never doing it, because then that starts eroding the trust in the relationship, because your mouth said that you would do it. In your head, you knew you weren't, but in your mouth said it. And so that is also dangerous. It's just a dangerous way of handling things. It does not get you what you want ultimately. And what I'm seeing in some of the comments is that one of the Amaka says that she doesn't nag. It's not worth it. And it just raises her blood pressure. And you're right. It does bring a man down. And I also want to make sure, because I didn't say it, I said it at the top of the hour. I had some people respond to me on social media and said, it's not just women who nag. There are some husbands that perhaps nag their wives. So I'm not just talking to women, but you're absolutely right that not doing it. But I want to make sure that if you're not nagging, that you haven't in your head just said, you know what, it doesn't make a bit of difference what I say. So I'm just not going to, because I do think it's important for you to communicate your needs. It's important for you to communicate your requests, but I just don't want you to hammer them. I don't want you to hammer them over and over, because that has a negative effect. And so for the person who is getting the request, if you're not going to do it, just be open and honest. Have the discussion. Why is it important to your spouse and not to you? Those are some of the things. And so I also want to draw a line, because loving confrontation is also a part of marriage. Loving confrontation is not nagging. It is not nagging. It is exactly what it says. It is loving confrontation. Babe, I noticed that there are several projects that you have not completed. Is there any particular reason? Get the reasons why. Opening up the door to communication, but that is loving confrontation. It's not, you always starting something. You never finish. You're stating your position, but you're not dragging it out for days. Because really, if you think about it, being nagged at is not fun. It is not fun. I read somewhere, someone said it's like being nibbled to death by a duck. It's just constant. It's constant. And I want you to think about that. Get that visual in your mind. When you find yourself nagging, I want you to imagine, are you trying to put your spouse to death through the nibbling of a duck? There's just no real productivity involved. So Amaka had it absolutely right. You can't do it. And if you also are not saying anything because you already expect the worst and you have a chip on your shoulder because of past history, that is also not a good position to be in. I always say that any conversation that starts out with, first of all, it's going to go downhill. So loving confrontation, not nagging. Something else that I have started, and my husband and I do it back and forth, if there is something that you want to remind your spouse about, this is not nagging, remember, loving confrontation, but sometimes reminders, because people get busy. We'll, if we shoot a text, we'll just say gentle reminder to. And the other way, which is what my husband suggested to me, he's like, if there's something that you've requested that I've done, you see that it's not done, check in with me. Hey, babe, I just want to check in. You said that you were going to do this, that, and the third. And do you need me to jump in? Because for us, my issue had been that I would ask him to do something, and it was a very specific thing. It was some work that we needed done around the house. He said he was going to reach out to some folks to get that done. And then I did it too. And in his mind, he's like, listen, if I tell you that I have it, I have it. Whereas it's true, I was dragging some past experiences. I was like, well, yeah, there are times that you said you had it, but I don't hear anything. And so what are we doing is in my head. And so by jumping in prior to actually even checking in, if I had said, hey, babe, just checking in, do you need me to, kind of help out? That would be better. That would be a way for me to make sure that things are getting done and not sitting back and saying, he's not going to do it. Asking, checking in. So remember, ask, gentle reminder. If you send in a text and then, hey, babe, you needed me to check in. Where is this? Or you said you were going to, be taken off early. I just want to check in. How's that going? Did you talk to your manager to see if that's going to be possible? Okay. And so when it comes to things like nagging your spouse about how they eat or if they're not exercising, that is a positive motivation. Your motivation is positive. And so what you have to do is request to your spouse, hey, babe, I really love you. And I want you to I want to be together. I want you to live longer. So I just want to remind you about that. That's a positive motivation. And the way that you're putting it is not in a negative way. It's not nagging them over and over every time they touch something. It's just putting that positive out there first. I love you and I want you to be around as long as you can be. So those kinds of things. And then two, for the folks who have nagged, I want you to really acknowledge your own imperfection in this, because let's be honest about it. This is an area of failure, because nagging and criticizing is actually a failure on our part. And I'm in the boat with you because I have nagged in the past. Because you remember a few weeks ago, I talked about that book, 7 Keys to Making Your Marriage Work. And one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, these are negative things that can befall your marriage. One of them was criticism. And so nagging can also, it's a very close cousin to criticism. And so criticism is something that can really chip away at the basis for your marriage. So I really want you to sit back and look at, you know what? My mouth, as I said, your mouth can lift up or it can burn your whole house down. And so knowing that, I want you to think about that when you are nagging, or attempting to, just say it over and over again because you want to get it done. I get that. And so the last tip I'll give you it's the first thing. It's really to pray to God that he will help you love and accept your mate. Think about this. Even if this thing persists, even if they don't do what it is that you want them to do, ask God to help you to love them anyway, because we are all imperfect beings. We all have something that isn't good. And so the way to really approach this is realize that it is probably not going to be best in the long run that you get what you want through nagging, but at the same time, you're messing with the foundation of your marriage and potentially causing there to be resistance and contempt that could build up because of the negative reaction to being nagged all the time. So just ask God for that. Okay. And if you have any scenarios where perhaps you want to share that you have nagged in the past and how you've gotten over it, I would love to hear that. You can email me at lynn@lynnsharif.com. I would love to hear your stories. And also, please know that if there are some additional things that you want to talk about with regards to your tongue, I've got several things that we're going to talk about. This is just the first one. I really would love to hear from you again at lynn@lynnsharif.com. And so you have been on IntellectualRadio.com. Lynn Sharif, the Wise Wife Radio Show. I'm just checking to make sure we don't have any more comments here. Very good. Okay. So again, you have been here with Lynn Sharif on the Wise Wife Radio Show. We will be back again on next week, Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye now.